call to order the Town of Hopkinton Planning Board of October 3rd, 2018. The first item is approval of our minutes from September the 5th. I'd like a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 5th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The second item on our agenda is a public hearing, and this is an advisory opinion to the town council, and it's a request for a comprehensive plan zoning map amendment for AP7 Lot 32, AP10 Lot 87, and AP11 Lot 35, Main Street, Atlantic Control Systems Incorporated. Care of James R. Grundy is our applicant.
Either side of the plan, as long as everybody can see it. If there's any questions?
All right, sir.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Robert Craven. I represent the applicant here in reference to a solar project in the town of Hopkinton. This, as the chairperson has indicated, is a request for a change to not only the zone, but the comprehensive plan to make it consistent. Place solar in an area now that is residential R80. I brought the engineer here to give you a more in-depth explanation of.
Just a little bit here for our colleagues.
See if we can find the sweet spots.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Is that all right?
That's fine, thank you.
Alan, ready to go over the highlights of the project? I'll turn it over to him.
My name is Alan Benavides. I'm from Morgan & Curran. I'm the senior vice president with the firm. We have an office in Providence, Rhode Island. The project tonight, we're working with a company that we've done about 30 projects with. Some of the projects, most of which have been in Rhode Island. Tonight, what I'll be doing is just giving you a brief overview of the site, and hopefully turning over to one of the principals for the firm to give you more detail on the background of the project. So the project's located at 0 Main Street, essentially down the road. To orient you, we've got Main Street running along the north part of the site, and we have Route 95 running along the south part of the site. The parcel is outlined here. Currently the parcel is largely undeveloped. There's areas of wetlands around the site. At this point, we've taken it through, essentially would be comparable to a pre-application level of design in order to get the orientation, layout, orientation to wetlands and so forth. Assuming we get to the next stage of the project, we go in more detailed design, and one of the reasons we're here tonight, we get feedback from the crowd in terms of the layout and so forth. What you see on the plan is the, well, maybe a touch of the green area. Green area is where the wetlands are. Significant portion of the boundaries of the site are located with wetlands. What we're showing is staying outside the wetlands, and we're also showing the buffer zones to the wetlands, and there's no work proposed in any of those areas. Ultimately, we would be submitting permits to Wyden as part of this process to get their confirmation regarding the wetlands. We're working within the usable areas of the site. The site's approximately 30 acres. The panel area is approximately about just under 10 acres. And then the fenced area would be 10.5 acres. Ultimately, site will be completely fenced. That fenced area is about 10 acres of the 30-acre site in total. We've maintained the 100-foot setback from all the property boundaries. In addition, there's a 50-foot no clear zone around the entirety of the perimeter as well. So you can see that illustrated on the drawing. There's panels, and you can see the panels that are located in the central portions of the site. Each one of the small squares, which no one can see in the room, but if you can see it closer, each one of those squares is essentially one of the solar panels. This array is approximately 5 megawatts, 5.2 megawatts. One of the things I think is a little unique regarding this, and Mr. Epps will get up in a few minutes, is what we try to do is really maximize the amount of output per land area, so we've got least land disturbance per megawatts. And one of the unique things of this is rather than what you maybe typically have seen or may have seen just in either part of the process or part of seeing on sites, typically arrays are oriented to the south. And this array is east-west rather than north-south. So it's a little bit different array. And again, it's in our opinion, the most efficient use of site and the most efficient means of providing the least footprint possible. So I think it's something that's a little bit unique, and Mr. Robson can provide more description regarding it. Yeah, I think it's a fairly straightforward project. The entrance is coming off Main Street, up in the north part of the site, coming into an area where the inverters and transformers will be located on a pad there, and then ultimately connecting into the array. As the project moves forward, we would start to move into more detailed grading and drainage and so forth. It's a fairly straightforward site in terms of engineering. It's something that, again, I've done personally 40 different solar arrays, but it's straightforward grading, drainage, nothing sort of unique or complicating about doing design as part of the project. So I think that gives a background in terms of what we're proposing, where it is, and what the orientation would be.
Alan, could you give the board some insight into how the project would be screened from public view?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's nice about this site is certainly you've got Route 95, where up against that boundary, I think is one of the things that could have public homes or viewports from that direction. In addition, we have that no disturb zone, so all the boundaries of the property are going to remain intact. There'd be no clearing. The only place where that's the case is when you come into the site, you would obviously have to clear in order to be able to get from the road to the site. That's the only place where we do the clearing around the boundary of the site, and we would leave that existing buffer intact. In addition, we've got along the entirety of the western boundary, we have a fairly significant area that we're obviously not going to disturb, so it provides a good buffer to the west. And we also have buffering in this direction with the wetland, in addition to the no disturb zones.
Could you define buffering?
Pardon me?
Could you define buffering?
Sure. So the buffering,
whatever we have in plan. I didn't get any, I don't think any of us got any agricultural plans with this preliminary. I understand they come later, but
correct.
I'm sure everybody would like to hear what we kind of have in mind for
Yeah.
buffer.
So as far as the buffer is concerned, what we're proposing to do is just not clear the entirety of it. So leave the existing vegetation in place. So that 50-foot no disturb zone would be the entirety of the boundary of the property. So nothing done within there, again with the one exception being the point where the roadway comes in, and obviously we have to clear through that. Otherwise, keep the existing vegetation 50 feet within the boundary of the parcel. And as you can see from the parcel, certainly in terms of abutting uses, it's a fairly well-screened site just as it is, but the natural screening is what would be maintaining.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions?
So,
Well, are you done with your presentation?
No, this is the engineer.
I think that was just a quick little.
Just the engineer. I'm going to bring up Mr. Ebbs in a minute.
okay, and so Mr. Edson is going to discuss what?
More of the specifics, the nuts and bolts of the project.
With regards to visual from the road and all of that, or just what exactly? Is this witness going to discuss, are we going to hear what we will see from 95?
Yes, you will, and I'll tell you what, we'll leave questions open for him so that In the event that either of them choose to answer it more definitively, we'll
Okay,
have
all right.
them both
That's
available.
fine.
Thanks, Alan. All right.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Members of the board, my name is Frank Epps. I'm the principal of Energy Development Partners, the developer for this project. And before I start, I'd like to say thank you to you for continuing the project from your last meeting. We had an emergency with my mom. She's fine, she's doing well, and I expect her to be around to kick my butt for the next weeks. At 94 years old, for quite a long time yet still. So thank you very much for your consideration. I appreciate that. The project itself is a very, very unique project for the state of Rhode Island. And the reason why it's designed this way is to be able to use the least amount of land to be able to create the most electricity. So we're talking a little bit of conventional wisdom here in the design of solar panels or design of solar facilities that you might have heard, and I'm sure you have heard, over the last years with other developers. So normally a solar panel is facing south. And by facing south, at this latitude and longitude, it has either a 20, 25, or 35 degree angle to the sun. And when that happens, the solar panels must be, the rows of the solar panels must be then for increased in space or have enough space between them so one panel row does not shade another row. And when you do this on a piece of property of this nature, we would normally come up with a facility that would be on a installed megawatt basis, about 2 to 2.5 megawatts. But if you're able to find a unique way to be able to handle the panels, and doing it in such a way that mimic maybe the way that a tracker system would use, in other words, a tracker system following the angle of the sun, but not have the tracker system in place because the tracker system is not only expensive, it uses oils and lubricants and so on for maintenance, which is something that we do not want to use in the property. We have the capability of having what they call an east-west orientation. And to my knowledge, there is no solar facility in the state of Rhode Island, or I think or in New England, that is using the east-west technology, or east-west orientation. So what happens with the east-west orientation? Well, the first thing that is the most important is that we're increasing the overall size of the system. But I want you to stop thinking about installed megawatts. I'd like you to start thinking more so about the production of electricity and how we can maximize the production of electricity with using the least amount of land possible. And that's what this system does. So an east-west system has panels, rows of panels go east, connected to rows of panels that go west. And they are therefore able to catch the sun as it rises from the east, of course, and follow the panels from the east to about 180 plus degrees. And then the other panels off to the west are now collecting the sun from 180 plus degrees all the way to 270 for the western orientation. Now this also gives us a capability of the least amount of clearing of the land, because as we have a sun situation from the panels facing to the south, the sun comes down, and therefore the shadows are created to the north, and so on. And here we don't have that issue, and so therefore I don't need to clear trees or areas. And this is one reason why we did it. And if everybody can hear me, this is one reason we did it, is because of the proximity of the wetlands, and we cannot touch the wetlands in any way, shape, or form. And so all this area remains intact with natural buffers. All the areas that Mr. Benavides was talking about remains intact, as well as the wetland areas. And so we're limiting the amount of tree clearing in every single situation. Now the other thing about an east-west orientation, and this is the reason why I'm able to add more panels to the overall design, is because instead of a 9 or 10 foot, normally maybe 12-foot distance between rows that you would have on a southern orientation, I have a 3-foot I think it's actually,
3.3.
excuse me?
3.3.
3.3, thank you. The 3.3 foot distance between the roads themselves. And the other portion of it, and since the angle of the, I don't have the glasses on right now, but since the angle of the orientation of the panels as such, we do also have the capability of reducing all types of capability of glare to surrounding areas, because the panels are not facing a certain area, creating any type of possible glare going out to the south or to other abutting areas, especially around Route 95. You have the capability where the panels are like this, and in the sun is, so they're basically more flat. Now, panels have a reflectivity quotient, or a Beano quotient, of what they call, it's a very, very low quotient. It's the same Beano quotient, or reflectivity quotient, as vegetation and grass. And so we run this through the FAA just to make sure that we were on target with it, and there was no FAA issues concerning this for overflights and for glare. And now, because the panels are flatter, the panels do not have the same height. And so since they are flatter, they're going to be closer to the ground. And there's no way, at least from what I can tell, I haven't done any scientific or viewpoint of this yet, but and because of the elevation of the panels off of Route 95, there's no way anybody's going to be able to see them. Because they're flatter, they're not glaring, and they're high up from Route 95. So clearly, what we've tried to do here is be conscientious about A, the use of land, B, the clearing of trees, and 3, the ability to be able to create as much electricity as we can through using the least amount of space that we can. And that is the whole objective of what we're trying to do here. And again, we believe, at least from the research that I've done, it is a very unique and what will be the first east-west orientation of a solar facility in the state of Rhode Island. Now, I've been able to permit and construct or under construction. So I either have operating, under construction, or fully permitted 12 solar systems in the state of Rhode Island. My background is I've been an independent business person in the state of Rhode Island for 28 years. I started in renewable energy in 2007, out west mostly. I was doing large wind turbines out there. And in 2010, I came back to my home state, which I still have my home in East Greenwich, and started a development firm. Now, we do not, in any way, shape, or form, own the solar facilities for long term. We sell our solar facilities to larger corporations, and these corporations are companies such as, and these are people who we have sold solar facilities to, AES, which is a very large independent power producer. We have sold them to Con Edison. That was the Glidden Christmas tree farm. It's all the way in the back of the Christmas tree farm that we did in 2011. We have sold them to Constellation Energy, who is in the process right now of buying one of our larger solar facilities. We've done solar facilities from 500 kilowatts on 2 or 3 acres, all the way up to, I just presented to the town of the planning board of North Kingstown last night for a 50 megawatt system at a dry bridge sand and stone, at a gravel pit that my company has taken over. So we have a very good understanding of a number of things, but the most thing is that we try to be, and have been, since you haven't really read about me, very good neighbors and very good landowners to the people who we lease land from, excuse me. And the reason why we don't do we do not own the solar facilities long term is because we do not believe that we have the resources to be able to maintain and an ongoing maintain of the solar facility per the very, very strict requirements that we have and that our larger public entities who own our facilities have. So this is not a hedge fund. This is not a private investors. However, I do have one small system that is owned by that I did up when I first started from the sons of the owners of CBS. But these are very large corporations who have a dedicated commitment to the communities that they're in. The key here is that they have the financial resources to operate the system. They have the financial resources to be able to give the town the correct type of financial sureties in building the system, and also decommissioning the system and removing the system accordingly. So we feel that that these systems are paramount to what is changing in the overall aspect of how we all retrieve electricity. So I can get into that a little bit if you'd like, but the market is changing, and the ownership of distributed generation for creating electricity that is used locally within the area or the feeding area of the systems, rather than from large systems such as coal and nuclear on the transmission side. The entire industry is changing. It's changing rapidly, and so our goal as a developer is to find a way to do it correctly, to be the good neighbor, to use as little land as possible to be able to create as much electricity as possible. And that is the whole premise of the design of the system. And I'm willing, of course, to take any questions and solve them.
Do you have more to present, sir?
Just a couple of questions I'd like to ask him, and then I'll turn both of them over to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Tell me about tax revenue.
Tax revenue. This will, of course, the system will be leased from the landowner, and the landowner is Mr. Grundy, who is a developer himself. The lease is a triple net lease, so the storage facility will be responsible for all the real estate or real taxes. And at the $5 per kilowatt AC system, I'm just going to imagine that we're at $5,000 per megawatt. We're looking at anywhere between $23,000 and $25,000 per year for tangible taxes to the town.
And there won't be any large-scale clearing?
No, not at all. Again, that's the nice thing about what we're saying to do. We don't need to clear to eliminate shading in back and front and so on. And the nice thing about it, we are on Route 95, and so it's going to, and we're high up, and so we're going to get a lot of the sun in the morning here, and that's paramount.
I have no further questions. Board members wish to have questions. Both Alan and Frank are available.
Okay, thank you. Just so that it's clear what this public hearing is in regards to, it's whether or not the planning board will give a recommendation to the town council. And it's the town council who actually makes the call of changing the zone for this parcel. So this parcel is currently zoned, a residential zone of RFR 80. And so that's what we're doing here this evening. So we aren't approving this project in any way, shape, or form. We're just giving our recommendation of whether or not we agree to the zone change for the comprehensive plan as well as our zoning map. Okay, so members of the board, Ron?
No, the other gentleman answered the only question that I had, when the presentation pretty much answered all my mental questions. So.
Hi, boys.
Very good presentation. I find some of this unique. There's a lot to digest. How many acres is the solar panels and the cleared buffer zone encompassing? Approximately.
10?
About that?
The total, all the solar and everything?
Yes.
Yeah, so the fenced area is 10.5 acres.
I thought that was just the buffer zone.
Yeah, 10.5 acres.
And what's the vegetation there like now of the 10 acres you're going to be clearing? Is it scrub? Is it good trees? Is it?
We're kind of a mix. There's a forested area, there's kind of lower growth, so it's essentially undeveloped, but it really is kind of a mixture of vegetation.
And I appreciate your east-west orientation. And the only argumentative point I'd make on that is you're still maximizing out all the available area. So I understand, but you couldn't make this any bigger if you wanted to because of the buffers and the wetlands and 95 and all of that, so.
Yes, true, but clearly, what we're trying to do is, of course, maximize the production of electricity to the site itself.
Yep.
And literally, we could have come in here with a 2.5 megawatt system.
Yeah.
South facing and so on, or a little bit less. But then it would be less benefit for the project, less financial benefit for the developer, and also less tax revenues for the town in doing so.
Don't get me going on the tax thing. The state setting our tax rate there's no words to describe it.
Well, if I can,
No, more power to you. You have that right. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to get into a debate with you about taxation and how it
I
happens.
just want to explain something. That came to be because there was a case in North Kingstown with a developer, I call it because I live in North Kingstown. It's the place where the giant windmill is, over near Walmart. And he took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that that's business equipment. It's not subject to tangible tax. So the General Assembly stepped in and said, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we're going to have this equipment taxed, and we're going to figure out a calculation based on megawatts. So that's how it came to be.
I'm fully aware how it came about.
Okay.
I'm saying, as a Hopkinton swamp Yankee, I don't agree. I like to set my own tax rates. I don't like the state doing it because I don't have any faith in the state whatsoever. All right, so there's a couple things I like. I like how it's back. I'm not going to be able to see it from Main Street. Not totally convinced you won't see it a little bit from 95, but I could care less if you can see it from 95. We have a board member that's not participating tonight that's going to insist that you can't see it from 95. So if there's any spots open or near anything, and this goes forward, I would suggest you work very diligently to make sure you can't see it from any road going through our town.
So we just finished the permitting of a project in Warren. And the key was the abutters looking at the screening that we were proposing and the height of the panels. Now that's a south-facing system. And so we did go out there with flags and poles and so on and provided and changed the design in so that they could not even see the upper edge of any single panel.
That's
so
fine.
We would do the same thing.
Giving you feedback.
Thank you. Great.
I appreciate the east-west, orientation. We've never heard that one before. That's unique and interesting. I appreciate that it's lower because that's been one of our concerns. I'm not a tree hugger, but I'm not crazy about clear-cutting another 10 acres in our town. But if this was to be developed residentially, I'm sure 6 or 7 of those will be cleared as well. The one thing that you're not going to get my support on, and I've been very consistent with this, is I'm not in favor of spot zoning. I am not in favor of creating commercial districts in residential areas. I don't know what to tell you other than that. I just don't agree with this, with the town council. I won't even get into, I think it's a waste of time tonight. I'm pretty sure this is already a done deal. I mean, we've got the construction going in town here already with the poles and all of that. So, I'll go through the steps with you, but.
Just to be clear, there is no poles or anything of that nature for our project
No,
whatsoever.
the state and Narragansett Electric's upgrading already down here, so we're not foolish. We've been around for a long time.
But clearly, I have no approvals for interconnection. I have no designs for interconnections or anything.
I believe you.
I just want to make sure that was stated.
All right, thank you.
That's it for now, I think, but probably gonna come back.
Sure.
The east-west design, if it's the first one we're around, where's this idea from? Where else is it successful?
Well, actually, it's very successful in Europe, in Germany. It's where I'm associated with an investor from Hamburg, Germany. It's my partner who helped me start the firm. He's done a number of solar facilities throughout Europe. And we have done a lot of research on the use of, or I should say, the efficiency of these systems. Clearly, it's more efficient to be able to use a south-facing system. However, we are trying to find the correct balance, if you will. And we're trying to find the correct balance in doing it such a way that makes it financially feasible to be able to produce the electricity. Now, it's interesting. There's one thing that's clear about this, about what's happening in the marketplace, and we didn't really get into that side of the discussion. But we're selling electricity that is at or under, and we can go into improving it later on, at or under market rates with solar facilities or renewable energy facilities right now. And so right now, and if you take a look at the forward capacity market, where the way that electricity is purchased 3 years ahead, we're looking, and I brought my home electric bill right now because I was taken back by a $300 electric bill for this month because the rates just shut up. But what we're looking at right now is being able to sell this electricity at under what they call the standard offering rate. For that national grid is buying electricity from isolated. And so, again, efficiency, the financial modeling of this, there's a number of interdependent sides of everything. So we have to be very consistent about the cost of capital, the cost of equipment. The cost of equipment, by the way, is going down. It's going down. It's plummeting, in fact. And also the idea of efficient use of land without having any, we're not using any lights, we're not using anything of that nature that would cause a disturbance. Now, I do have a solar facility that is right next to a residential street in Middletown, Connecticut, Middletown, Rhode Island, at the Hopkinton Industrial Park, in back of the new Newport bank system, or bank headquarters. And the drive there is called Ocean View Drive. This is a 500 kilowatt system that is about 8.5 feet off the ground for the top edge. It's completely cleared. The lot is completely cleared. It's only about 3 to 4 acres of land. And I have had neighbors come to me and say that we're the best neighbor that they ever had. We don't create any noise. We don't create any light. We don't have any nuisance. We don't use any chemicals. It's all the traffic. It's all the things that you have heard from other developers. But I wanted to make sure that yes, we have those benefits, but we also have the benefit of this of what I call a very unique design. It's effective and it is in place in Europe.
How many homes are in that area?
I believe there are 4 or 5 homes in the surrounding area. And I have not reached out to do a community outreach yet for this project. This is something that I will be doing, and I do in every single project. We do meet with all the abutters, but clearly I have not met with the abutters or listened or talked to them at all to this point.
Well, you mentioned Europe, and we appreciate that, but who controls the sale whatever time you want to give the property up and sell it to somebody else? And does the state control the sale? Does the town control the sale? Or you can sell it to anybody you want?
I'm not the property. We're not the property owner. The property owner is Mr. Grundy, who is the applicant, and we are leasing the land from him.
So I'd like to comment on a few things that you stated. Your good neighbor thing, that was within an industrial park. So you built your solar field that you were just referring to, you said that was within an industrial park, correct?
Well, the most recent one, that I have 2 of them in industrial parks.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing you mentioned, if this were a gravel bank, I'd be all over it, But this is currently zoned residential, and so what we are doing tonight is deciding of why we should recommend to rezone it to commercial special to allow this. So what about this particular parcel would dictate that you couldn't build houses on it?
You can build houses on it.
Okay, so there's,
And you know, the site can have houses on it.
Okay.
In fact, there was a pre-application about 2 years ago for this site for about 12 homes.
okay.
And the owner of the property is a developer. So this is not, it's more of a financial reality, if you will, that the land will be developed.
Okay.
And we believe that this is the most passive use for the property and the most benefit for the town.
From my perspective, if this land was zoned commercial, sure, you know, because this is, that's an allowed permitted use. I'm very intrigued by your east-west thing and keeping the solar panels lower. I think that's, I'm interested, although I think you're making more, if it's flatter, I worry about the runoff, but that's for a later discussion.
Sure.
But so, I guess I agree with my colleague, Tom, in regards to changing the zone on this particular parcel to do this commercial development when it could be developed. I'm not, the planning board, we aren't some rogue thing of saying that you can't develop any of the land. You know, we're following what, you know, what the regulations say or what the zoning map says that it should be. And so if this land could still be developed as residential, then I don't see why we would say that I would recommend doing
May I
this.
just add a little something to that? You have two paths to go with the council. You have to have a zoning amendment, and you have to rewrite part of the comprehensive plan.
That's correct.
These zoning laws and ordinances were put in place through town meetings and due process. The comprehensive plan can be adjusted, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, but that was also determined by the townspeople in many meetings and votes and things like that. I take that extremely seriously, that you have to go before the council and ask them, absolutely in the public hearings, so the townspeople do have a right to say and with the due process. But this town has stood firm and says we're a residential town, we want residential land, and that's both echoed in our zoning laws and the comprehensive plan. So we've seen 2, 3 of these so far, and the council's just blessed them like it was Christmas. And that's my only point with this one. I too am very intrigued by your east-west design and your lower panels. And it's a great site for it because it keeps it away. I'm assuming it's keeping it away from the homes. I haven't looked too carefully with the 4 or 5 homes that surround us. Again, I agree with Amy totally. If this was industrial land or commercial land, you'd be having my blessing right now.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate it. And we want to, clearly, we built our company based on integrity and
That's
and
not
respect.
what it's an issue. The issue is, we're here tonight not to judge you. We're here to judge whether we want to change residential land to commercial land. And if we want to rewrite our comprehensive plan to support that.
What I really wanted to say to you is that only one other time have I gone in front of a planning board for an advisory opinion for a zone change. And I did that in the town of Richmond. And we just finished, we did do that based on a number of restrictions, very specific restrictions on the development of this piece of property that we developed. By the way, it was not the solar facility that was in the newspaper. This one is built, it will be operating within the next couple of weeks. And
I would just be
only
careful, sir, because Hopkinton takes issue, we are Hopkinton and not Richmond. So
Well,
I understand what Richmond did, but.
But no, what I was trying to say is that I appreciate what your position. I'm not here in any way, shape, or form to argue your position, but just to give you what I believe are the merits of the project.
Sure, I understood. So thank you. And we do appreciate your respectful approach to our board, and it seems like you're an upstanding individual. It's nothing against you. It's just really about our comprehensive plan in our zoning map. And so whether or not this fits in, so, but absolutely, go ahead, Rob.
To back up what Amy and Tom said, our job, as I understand it, is to observe the comprehensive plan. These are the people that we have to make happy. You really got to sell me on the fact that it's going to benefit the town of Hopkinton and everybody in this room to change their zoning thing. You know, but, you know, do your due diligence, do whatever you need to do for permitting, whatever. And, you know, God bless you, it looks like a great project. But there again, I'm like Tom. Swamp Yankee, you have to prove to me that if I say yes, it's to benefit them.
Understood.
Couple of quick points on that.
Yes.
The reason you're here to ask for a zone change, is we have very little commercial land in Hopkinton. We've done that on purpose. Plain and simple. Secondly, this might be a little odd question, but we've been told, obviously we've been inundated with solar plants over the past 9 months. And some have been forthright, some may not have been. I don't know that. But one that I did look favorably on as a developer, not necessarily as his projects, he was telling us that there's some sort of a way that Narragansett gives credit back to the townspeople for the solar projects that are developed in town. Does that ring a bell at all? Because, let me finish. So after hearing from him, I called Narragansett Electric, I emailed Narragansett Electric, and it's like trying to get to the Pope. I can't even get anyone to talk to, let alone answer that question.
There are a number of ways to be able to sell electricity to Narragansett, and there are a number of entities that have the capability of providing or benefiting from them. In this project, we're not 100% sure what we were going to do, but there's one aspect, and this is maybe what this other individual was talking about. There is a tariff out there called community solar. And a tariff by the PUC. I believe I can help you get the tariff. And by the way, I sat in a number of the past meetings, and when we were first looking at this, even about a year or so ago, if I'm not familiar. I don't think I had that much more hair than either. But the tariff of community solar allows individuals within the community, so residents, to be able to buy into the facility and buy the electricity from the facility at a discounted rate. There is a limit to the amount of community solar projects that are allowed in the state. To my knowledge, at this time, that limit has been reached.
Has
been reached, yes. However, that does not mean that it cannot change. And so there possibly could be legislation in the next legislative round that could increase that. Now, please, I'm not in the community solar business because the community solar business is a very, very difficult business, not in the idea of building the solar park, but in the back office arrangements in billing out 100, 200, 300 residents or so on, or the amount of electricity that's being used. But I do know that any of the community solar projects that are in place, that you have to have an anchor tenant or an anchor off-taker. And that anchor off-taker has to take at least 50% of the solar, of the electricity from the facility, and then the balance can be sold as the community solar to the resident. I'm not 100% sure as to the qualifications of that anchor tenant. I can tell you that the projects that we have done, we have sold the electricity directly to National Grid through the Renewable Energy Growth Program. We have 7 projects on those, and that's a competitive bid process. And we are also in the business for net metering and remote net metering. And by remote net metering, I simply mean that we can feed in the electricity into the grid, and then Narragansett, or National Grid, gives us a credit, and then we sell that credit at a discount to an entity that is allowed to buy that credit by the tariff. Today, we, Energy Development Partners, has contracts with the University of Rhode Island, Johnson and Wales University, the communities of North Smithfield, the school system of North Smithfield, and others. So we would most likely look at this as a remote net metering for municipal or public entity or nonprofit, rather than a community center. But there is a tariff out there, and I'm not 100% sure of what the access is, but I'd be very happy to send you the tariff. It's about this thick.
Sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare.
One second, sir. So we all.
I'm good.
Okay, go ahead.
About the wetlands. Who polices that? And do the wetlands ever, does the size of the wetlands change, or does it?
Yeah. So what we've got here is the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management has a database of wetlands. And so that's what we've shown here. What we would do as part of the next phase is do exactly what you said to make sure there haven't been changes to the wetlands. So we'll go out there, send out a wetland biologist, and make sure that whatever the point, and I'm not sure, it depends on the town when ultimately the state delineation was done. So we'll delineate them real time. But then what happens as well is we'll delineate them. It goes back to RIDEM. We'll submit an application that's called a preliminary determination. We'll identify what we think the wetlands are now, and they would ultimately approve it. So
This may not be accurate now.
this is accurate as is the most recent version that's issued by RIDEM. We'll, as the project goes forward, confirm it. If we have any disagreements with RIDEM, we would go in as part of that. But we'd also go in as part of being proximity to the wetlands.
How do we vote if we don't know if it's accurate now?
Well, it would adjust your,
This is 100% accurate, so there's nothing inaccurate about this map, but it really is to do what you were describing, to make sure that today, that nothing about RIDEM's delineation has changed. We want to make sure that it's correct. We don't want to go in and find that areas have increased, and we haven't compensated. So we always make sure we go in and check the wetlands before we go ahead. We just don't use what's on the GIS map.
Case in point would be Big John Layton's Christmas Tree Farm in West Greenwich. When we first did our pre-application with the planning board in West Greenwich in 2012, we had a certain designation of the GIS map. Little did we know that beavers had created a dam, and the wetlands had now increased by 750 feet. Our project was then, therefore, reduced in size and moved accordingly outside the wetlands. We do not work on what they call significant alterations from RIDEM. We deal only with insignificant alterations from RIDEM. We don't feel that it is in our best interest or the best interest of the community or the wetlands to do otherwise.
Now at this stage, I'd like to open up to members of the public.
My name is Joe Moreau. I live on Old Depot Road in Hopkinton. My wife and I moved here in the year 2000. We moved here from Western Coventry. Before we purchased our home, I came to this very building. In fact, before we even looked in our home, I was here. And the reason I was here was I wanted to look at the zoning, because there's a huge parcel across from my home, which is all forest. And I found that that parcel was RFR 80. That's why I purchased our home. In my opinion, these projects bring no homes, no jobs, no people. I am familiar with Layton Tree Farm. I used to live in Western Coventry. When my daughter was very young, we used to go there. We used to go on the pumpkin rides. We bought products from that facility. That's what family is really about. What I'm really concerned with is this is RFR 80. You could build homes on this property. Homes should be built. Again, in my opinion, not everyone, but some town council members have put our planning board in a real difficult position. They really have. The last thing I want to mention is that this is from the planners.com Understanding Spot Zoning. The classic definition of spot zoning is the process of singling out a small parcel of land for a use classification totally different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of others. That detriment is my largest purchase, which is my home. Doing my research, that home could be affected 20, 30, 40% in value. If I bought my property and across the street it was commercial, that's my responsibility. The responsibility, I believe, of the town council, some members of the town council, is to protect my largest investment. I bought residential, it should remain residential. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Goodwin.
Hi, I'm Eric Fiddler, 119 Bigelow Road. I don't have any name, sir, but I just want to compliment you. Frank, I think that's a very thoughtful design. I love the engineering, I love everything about the design, and I love everything you're doing. The only thing I don't like is the location. Okay. I think members of the planning board said many of the things that I wanted to say, but I just wanted to start, first of all, again, by thanking the planning board. We so appreciate that you are sticking to the principles through which a comprehensive plan is developed and voted in a town, and sets forth, you know, these various zones and restrictions and so forth and so on, and they're not to be violated easily. We've had 22, according to the most recent overview provided by the town planner, I think we have had 22 proposals for solar projects. 4 of those which were resulted in zoning changes that were approved by the town council, not necessarily by the planning board. 2 of them are pending, they're huge, Brushy Brook and the one up here at Woodville Road. And then we have a 7th. So in the course of, I think, less than 2 years, this is the 7th request to rezone residential property to commercial special. And it's really getting to the point with all these approvals, or at least serious entertainment of these projects, such as the one last night, which would be clearing 175 acres and 35,000 trees. You know, it's starting to seem like our comprehensive plan doesn't mean anything to some members of the town council. Tom, I think you mentioned, Mr. Holbert, you mentioned the word spot zoning. I mean, the definition is very clear cut. Joe mentioned it, and I have said on other occasions that, you know, if I move to this town and I purchase a house or purchase a piece of land and build a house in a residential zone, I have a reasonable expectation that I'm not going to wake up one morning and find a 10-acre or 175-acre industrial plant across the street from me. And I don't want to talk about buffers and setbacks and screening and so forth. I'm in a residential district. It was set aside that way. That's important. I also, this is not so much, this is to your project, but also on Monday when we had a hearing, and I've heard it in every single hearing, and I've heard this planning board, the chairman who's not here today, say, you know, look, the days of threatening something worse, you know, if you don't give me my approval for this commercial use, then we'll do something worse, are over. On Monday and a little bit tonight, you know, we keep hearing this equivalency of, you know, it's already been approved for residential and that would involve clearing, and this is much better because it's passive and it's almost the same thing. It's not almost the same thing. Residential parcels are approved for residential development. That's why those things get approved. It is not the same. We have to stop drawing this false equivalency of this is the same, only better. So I just want to leave you with two other thoughts. Everybody professes to be a good neighbor, and I'm sure you would be, and I'm sure you're going to design your project, take every precaution to make sure that it's well designed. But the fact is, with this project and every other project, they all get flipped. They all get sold. They get sold multiple times. The people that put them in the ground aren't the people that ultimately want to own them. We don't know who our neighbors are going to be. So this whole good neighbor argument, I think, is an empty argument. And I just want to give you something that I printed off of the town's website through the GIS map. I kind of drew the roads in to make it a little easier to read. I'm going to leave this with the planning board. you know, you can go on the town's website and you can pull up a map, and then you can also pull up the radius map that shows all the homes within a certain radius, and then you can generate an abutter list. And typically, the list that is generated by the developers, and I don't mean this personally, is, you know, 200 feet, I think, is the test, you know, within 200 feet of the project. But I drew up one of these radius maps, or printed it, that's all I did. And in fact, what you find if you draw a radius of, say, I don't know what this is, a couple thousand feet or 1,500 feet, I'm not looking at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 homes. I'm looking at a very densely populated neighborhood here. This is a neighborhood. You know, this is where families move, and it has a certain character, and it's a residential zone. So I just want to leave that with you to make that point.
Thank you, sir, but to be clear, the developers that stayed within our ordinances, they're doing what we require. So they aren't trying to be charlatan about anything, it's what our regulations state.
So if I
thank
imply
you.
that, I don't want to imply that. I don't want to imply that you're doing anything other
Okay,
than that.
all right, thank you, sir.
All right, thanks.
And I would caution that, that this hearing is about this particular parcel, so if we could keep our comments regarded to that, I would appreciate it. So, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to let you know your presentation was very conscientious.
Can you say your name, sir?
My name is Steve Brophy. We have a house on Cedarwood Lane.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say, I thought your presentation was very conscientious and very respectful of the board and the people here. Thank you. I also wanted to say to the board, this will be really quick, I'm very grateful that you guys are adhering to the comprehensive plan, unlike the town council. It isn't going unnoticed, okay? There's a lot of people I know, there's a lot of people here, there's great interest on the subject, and we really appreciate you guys laying down the law on the comprehensive plan and adhering to what we want in this town and why we moved here. So it's very much appreciated, and I just wanted to let you know I'm speaking for a lot of people who aren't here, who aren't talking to you, just to let you guys know how much we appreciate your hard work.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the board? So at this point, oh wait, Jim, do you have anything to add?
I just got an email at 4:12 this afternoon, that went to the board from someone who couldn't make the meeting, was passed out tonight. I don't know if you want to read it or read it for the record. All of these? Well, one pertains to this particular case. One of them.
Should we read it?
Sure.
Okay. So this email was from Kathleen, Wayne, Madeline, and Julia Suits. And the subject is the Atlantic Solar Proposal, which is referring to this parcel. And it states that I am working this evening, so I cannot attend the meeting tonight. I just wanted the planning board to know that my family applauds your resolve to protect our lovely rural town from the relentless push by developers to create so many huge industrial zones in our wooded residential areas, i.e. spot zoning. We live here because some other formerly rural community that has suffered, oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm very tired, I'm sorry. We live here because the rural character of this town is so unique in Rhode Island, a fact that I'm reminded of every time I travel to Warwick or some other formerly rural community that has suffered from unfettered development. Please continue to fight to preserve our neighborhoods and wildlife habitats by opposing commercial zoning proposals that require zone changes. Sincerely. Okay, so members of the board? Now we need to decide if we would like to provide a positive or negative recommendation to the town council.
Well, I'll go first. Gotta be brief. Gentlemen, it looks like a fantastic project. I don't say that lightly. 45 years I was in power generation, building, maintaining, and whatnot. You need to know right, 45 years. Great looking project. And I agree with Ms. Williams. If this was already zoned manufacturing, I'd be on it like you wouldn't believe. It's the zoning that is giving me trouble. I can say, probably without a doubt, that I have more seniority in this town than anybody. I've been here 68 years. Anybody else that has more seniority, please step up. That's it, you know, the zoning is the only thing that gets me. I would love to see a project like this going. But we're rural for a reason. That's it.
Not quite as old. But I've been in construction for 40 years. Obviously, I've heard it all at least twice. Your presentations were flawless. I believe everything you said. I promised myself when this started, not yours, but when this dilemma started in the town, that I look at everything on a case-by-case basis. I want to support this. If there was ever one that I could support, it would be this. My biggest problem is it's an industrial manufacturing facility. And it just doesn't belong in a residential area. And I have to stick to my guns, and I have to be consistent. And I'm not in favor of changing the zoning to allow this in this location. I wish it was somewhere else.
So, I'd like to make a motion that we do not support this application for a zone change with regard to the future land map or the comprehensive plan, supported by the 2016 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Goal LU1, which is to protect the quality of life and rural character of Hopkinton. Additionally, Goal LU4, which is to preserve existing farms, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. And the other one is about housing, that we're a rural community and that we, hold on. It would be goal H1, the Hopkinton will be characterized by safe, secure, and attractive residential neighborhoods. So, I have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
So, I'd like to close the public hearing. Old business is a 3-lot minor subdivision.
It's an educational property. And there can be an advocate that say that. Right? Oh, maybe not as articulate.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our next item of business is old business. This is a 3-lot minor subdivision. It's a preliminary plan. It's AP4 lot 121EE, Diamond Hill Road. Anthony Coloni is the applicant. The planning board may discuss, consider, and vote on the application in this meeting. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Anthony Coloni. I'm here with my 2 sons tonight, Thomas and Anthony Jr.
Hi.
I guess I should give you a brief history of this piece of property. If I go on too long, you can just tell me to stop. But I purchased this property 30 years ago. And in 2011, I came before the board and created a 1-lot residential compound
to divide one lot off of 121DD, which is adjoining to 121E. It was a total of 98 acres, two separate pieces of property. And back in 2012, that was why Lonely Way was created. Lonely Way was created to get to the lot that I created. It was for one of my children, one of my daughters. Once I created that lot,
Which point the lot up, Tony? Which lot is this we're talking about? I can't
it's
remember.
not even on here. It's 121DD, which is now owned by the Hopkinton Land Trust.
Gotcha.
So I divided that one lot off to one of my daughters. At the same time, I transferred 52 acres of 121DD, the balance of the property, to the Hopkinton Land Trust. And at that time, it was talked about that Lonely Way Lonely Way is actually built on a right-of-way because there's a piece of property behind my property that they have in the deeds, there's a right-of-way that goes all the way to their property. So it was the natural spot to have that Lonely Way because it already existed really as a right-of-way. So at that point, like I said, there was talk about that Lonely Way would possibly be a residential compound down the road. Well, lo and behold, two of my other children want to come back to the area. Both Cheraho graduates. Anthony Jr. served in the military and was a North Kingstown police officer for quite a while. And my daughter and her husband, he's in the active Navy, stationed in Groton. Both of them waiting patiently, see if Dad can get a couple more building lots so they can come back to town. So that brings you up to date. And then I came here about a year and a half ago to just preliminarily propose just what we were going to do, and we finally got back here. To start out, what we did was we had the wetlands flagged, and once they were flagged, under Mr. Diorio's advice, he said, let's get a verification from DEM to make sure that there's no discrepancies, that is where the wetlands are accurately. So we did. I had DEM come out, they inspected the flagging of the wetlands, and I have to say, I did meet one of the biologists out there, and he said, well, you do know that what we're here for is to make sure that the flags if they have to be moved to increase the wetlands, that's what we're here for. Okay, I knew that. So, at any rate, no flags were moved. So, everything was left the way it was flagged. So, from that point on, we went and we obtained approval from the wetland department. We got our wetland permit. Followed up with septic design approvals, which we got. The wetland approval was in August 24th of this year, and the septic approval was September 5th of this year. We spent a great deal of time. One of the reasons why it took this long to come back here is we spent a great deal of time siting of the houses, making sure that which of course we were wetlands on this, making sure that no water was added to the wetlands or no water was taken away from the wetlands. The water, any water that from rain that falls on the property is going to be controlled on the property through use of rain gardens, swales, so that the water seeps slowly into the ground, not into the wetlands to add to it. The septic systems, once again, are now state-of-the-art septic systems and not your ordinary run-of-the-mill septic system. It's a state-of-the-art system on both lots. The property is primarily surrounded, of course, 2 acre RFR 80 zoning is up. Most of the properties in that area are zoned R1. So a lot of the properties are quite a bit smaller. And that's about really all I've got to say. Do you have any questions?
Can I start?
Sure.
In Tony's defense, we've seen this for years and years and years, some of us.
Yeah.
Tony didn't create this crazy shaped lot.
No.
He bought it that way. This isn't from a subdivision upon cutting up and all of that. I've looked at it for years and I'm still a little confused by it. I wish the prints said what lots existed and what lots are proposed. Because as it looks right now, as this map shows us, it looks like on the 2 you've got there, do either of those lots exist now?
No, these are the proposed lots.
So those are the 2 proposed
These
lots.
lots are
So you're talking about creating a regular standard road front lot. It's
Well,
got-
actually, yes.
Let-
One of these lots is a standard
Let me fin-
conventional 2 acre lot.
Let me finish.
Go
So
ahead.
the lot you're pointing to
Yes.
conforms to our normal zoning. It's got 225 foot of frontage, it's 80,000 plus square feet, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Okay. Now you're talking about a compound for the rest of the acreage, and you only want to do one lot as of now, calling it phase 1.
Correct.
And what this other part is that's not on your map that we're looking at is just a rendering of what could be phase 2 somewhere down the line if you choose to do it.
A rendering because the town requires.
The ordinance requires.
Yes, yes. And basically, that's it. I mean, I haven't been back here for 6 or 7 years.
Right.
What's going to happen with that, I couldn't say.
Understood. I just want to know what's existing and what
Yes.
you're asking for
Yes.
tonight. Jim, I assume the checklists are all complete for where we're at right now, and that this is all conforming to the ordinance. I can go over it point by point.
Yeah, I issued a letter of
Yep.
completeness on this application.
Yep, okay. Good. I think I'm good to go.
First, I'd like to congratulate and thank all your family members for their service.
Thank you.
Going over these plans extensively. Go with God, my son. You have my blessing. Everything looks great.
Thank you.
It's encouraging that you're keeping your family here, you're making provisions for more family members to come.
Well, not to stick up for you any more than I already have, but he also did one lot and transferred a bunch of land to a land trust at one point in time too.
Yeah.
The community's made up of people. I believe that. You know, and our kids are the future. So,
Yeah, you have my blessing on this.
Just agree with my colleagues. Great point.
Just as a point of reference,
Sure.
we did receive a letter from Lori Oldstich, which was close to your parcel off 149 Diamond Hill Road, parcel 45, and she couldn't be here this evening.
yes.
And so she, just as for record, she had several concerns about these lots. So part of her concern was why you're building on these particular lots and not your other compound lots. I take it just that can you tell me why?
Sure. Well, number one, this is a beautiful area right here. I mean, it's all ferns, 50-year-old trees and older than that. There's the road frontage, and we did some preliminary test holes for septic systems, and you know, we found that no problem, we could have septic systems. You know, I went through the expense of having the wetlands flagged and so on and so forth, and it's, you know, met with DEM, and it's like, okay, submit it to us, we'll come out and verify the wetland edge. I mean, so it all basically fell into place, is what it did. It just started falling into place. I mean,
Well, I don't believe it's the board's role to tell a landowner where they can build and where they can't build if you own all of this property. I'm not telling you that you can't have your houses there, but you're not going to disturb the wetlands because they've been flagged. So it's not like you're going in and cutting the wetlands. And so I think part of Ms. Oldtish's current concerns were about the wetlands. But as far as I can see, you're staying far away from that, and so that's fine.
Well, and more importantly, he's received wetlands verification and site suitability.
Right. So.
I understand that, nobody really wants to see, if they're used to living across the street from a wooded area, nobody wants to see the trees come down and the house replaced, but it's for a good cause.
Right.
So, it's, what are you gonna do? You want people, right?
Right. Yes, we're moving to. Jim?
Oh, I'm fine.
Members of the public? Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Come on. You just have to say your name. That's the only requirement.
Hi, I'm Jane Reed. I live at 190 Diamond Hill Road.
Okay.
And again, the lot is very kind of strange, and I'm very familiar with Colony Way because I live right next to Colony Way. Are your proposals going to go in back of our house, or are they going to go straight down Colony Way where the first house was?
Honestly, I don't have any plans for Colony Way at this point. It may never take place. If the land trust wanted to come to me and possibly add that onto their property, that may end up going that direction. I mean, but right now, these two lots that are being proposed are quite a bit up the street from you.
Okay, so you're facing, say, Colony Way at Shore, right?
Yes, about
Okay.
a quarter of a mile up the street.
Okay, and that's what I was just curious to know.
Yeah.
If houses were going in the back of line or off to the right?
Way up the
Up to
street
the-
to the
okay.
right. Oh,
That's all I
just
wanted to know.
near where Andre lives.
Yes.
Near Andre lives.
Okay. All right, I was just curious.
No, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, my name is Tom Jarrett. I'm a new resident of Ashway. We live at 178 Diamond Hill Road, parcel 120, I believe. It's the Babcock Wells house, the old colonial one that we are slowly restoring.
Nice.
My question concerns how this project would affect the easement that I see on the Poloni Preserve trail map. That seems to come out very close, but I'm not sure whether it crosses the proposed lots. You know that you're familiar with the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District map? It's this one. And it's not located by parcel, but it did seem to come close to that region. And so my question really is how that easement would be affected by this development.
Do you know what that easement, sir? Yes. Yeah.
Amy, that's
Do you-
the map I made.
Okay. Go ahead, Harvey.
This
Oh, it's on
shaded
the
area,
side of it.
this
20
shaded
foot.
area is the 52 acres that I deeded to the land trust.
You see the P where apparently parking lot is designated and the trail comes out
Yeah.
onto Diamond Hill Road.
Yeah,
Yeah, it says that there's a 20-foot wide easement in
Yes.
favor of parcel 121DD.
right.
I guess to the,
I've never seen.
That is a hiking trail that besides the 52 acres here,
yeah,
I gave the land trust an easement to continue a hiking trail just right along that line right there.
okay.
And it comes out onto Diamond Hill Road over here.
Yeah, I see it here on our schematic.
Yeah,
I see it.
yeah. Which is actually right here.
Yep.
It comes right out right here. The land trust has indicated to me that what their hopes are, and if there's anything I could do to help them, is to take that, I'm telling you, I'm right with this, Harvey, is to bring this hiking trail straight out over here to Newbury Court. That way they would have some parking over there, and then they can, you have the property right across from that, they can just continue on, right?
We'd have to get permission to cross other properties.
Yeah.
To get out to Newbury Court or to get out to
Right,
Top Valley Road.
there's one property there.
It's very narrow, it's one of those bowling alley with a hook in it property.
So Harvey, what would you like to say?
Well, I think it's all been said pretty much, but that is a trail easement we've had. I've got an Eagle Scout project starting this weekend that's related to Poloni property preserve, and we're putting up notice boards, and we've got our kiosk design. One will be intended to go out on Diamond Hill Road in that 20-foot, is it 20 foot? I think it's 20 or 25 foot.
20, I'm on that.
Area there, and frankly, I just wanted, I've been needing to hook up with Anthony and get out there. He's been very helpful to us over the years with the preserve, and it's just a matter of coordinating. But it will be, so those lots, what I didn't understand, because I had seen it, we're actually will be crossing one of the residential lots that's going to be created that you're proposing, right? With the trail.
Along the side.
So so obviously that deed will transfer to their.
Of course.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. Anyone else?
Has anybody hiked any of the trails? Other than Harvey? All right. Great.
I just have a question. My name is Dan Brousseau, and we're right next to that spot. We're right on the corner of Andre Court.
Oh, you're in the corner?
Yeah.
I was wondering who lived there.
Yeah, my wife's been living there her entire life. So the only question I have is, there's a 433-foot frontage right here, and you're proposing 2 parcels there. As long as they're still RFR 80, they can't both have 225-foot frontage.
No, this is the 225-foot frontage. It's a conventional lot.
Yeah.
This is a residential compound lot, which you don't have to have a 225-foot frontage.
Okay. I guess I don't understand. I'll read it.
It's a different regulation.
Right. So if they were both residential lots, you're correct. But that one lot is going to be part of a compound, which includes further back the rest of Poloni Way.
Okay.
And so that the regulations of that are different.
This is all going to be open space behind it. So nothing's going to ever be going built there all the way down and on like that.
And
This is all open space.
I think our other thing that I just want some assurance. We end up with a lot of standing water, even in our yard, whenever it rains. That whole area gets very swampy. Even looking in this area, that's why there's so many.
It's your neighbor that
Yeah.
all the water is.
Oh yeah, that even when it hasn't rained, that's just standing water. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
This area, we see all the ferns though. I guess you did get the what was it? Who is it that does the validation of the wetlands?
Well,
And what stops that area from getting filled in? I'm not worried about your family. I know you're a very upstanding citizen. You've given land to the land trust. Yeah, you guys haven't done anything with the land all this time. I understand that. My only concern is in a few years, these certainly could get sold, right? I believe your daughters may have.
Nothing's going to still be changing.
But someone could fill in those rain gardens. I'm worried about the water ending up on my property and us having even more water problems than we have today.
There's, all the water that's on these 2 lots is going to be contained on these lots. No water is going to go into, first of all, the water doesn't go this way. But actually, I should have brought that up. One of the unique things about these 2 lots is that any water that is on these 2 lots from rainfall, puddling, whatever, stays on these 2 lots. It doesn't flow onto a neighbor to the right. It doesn't flow to the left. It flows directly on these lots, and it stays there. I mean, so it's I'm not influencing anybody else's property.
To answer your question, he's got permitting in place, or going to be in place shortly, that doesn't allow him to construct anything that lets the water go off his land. If in the future someone bought that and altered that, your recourse would be to go to Rhode Island DEM and ask them to come investigate. They come investigate, they give them a cease and desist order, and they make them change it back. The mechanisms are in place
The
to
state
protect
will
you.
well protect you.
Okay, those were the questions I had.
Oh, appreciate it.
That doesn't clear to me why there's two different zones. Danica Brousseau. I just don't understand why this is one parcel of land and one is rated for a compound and one is rated residential. Is there someone who could explain that to
I
me?
could-
Just so I understand.
We have a number of ordinances in town that allow development, cluster ordinances, PUDs, conventional subdivisions, both minor, which are 5 lots or less, or major, which are 5 lots or more. We also have a nice little ordinance in town, it used to be called the family compound. And it was developed to allow large acreages to divide some lots up for their family members and make it a little less stringent for them. In other words, they don't have to put in town roads, they can put in a private road. The trade-off and what an applicant like Tony has given back is they dedicate large areas to open space. So he's combining 2 of our ordinances right now. He's doing a complete normal minor subdivision, one road front lot, which conforms to all our regulations. It's got the footage, the proper square footage, it's got the proper road frontage. Then he's also, because the lot is so odd shaped, it just looks odd to you right now. And what he's doing is a compound with the rest of it. And the compound ordinance also allows him to do it in phases. He's choosing, he could do up to 7 lots on this piece of property. And he's choosing right now just to do one of those 7 lots.
So it's just a mechanism to allow him basically to put the 2 lots today. By having one do the one normal lot and the other one do part of a compound. So in theory, you could make both of them part of a compound. You could have both lots be part of a compound, but then that gets into other regulations that we would have to do, correct? Okay. Any other questions?
Jim, what path are we taking here? Is it preliminary? So he's looking for, does it have to be 2 separate motions to grant the road front lot as a normal?
No, I wouldn't say so, no. It could be done in one motion.
As granting the residential compound, and then that lot's created by default?
Well, they're asking to create 2 lots here.
Right.
Right? And so
One is a conventional subdivision lot, one's a compound.
Right, but the preliminary approval is for the creation of 2 lots, regardless of what type of subdivision it may fall under. He's creating 2 lots, one of which is going to be lot 1, possibly of more compound lots, maximum of 7.
Not to be argumentative then, but if we grant this, we're creating 3 lots. We're creating the 2.
Yeah, technically it is a 3-lot compound. You
So
would
it's a
call this a
3-lot
3-lot.
minor subdivision.
I mean, 3-lot subdivision, sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
The 3-lot minor subdivision.
Correct.
And
It's a hybrid.
would you like to come back before us for final, or would you like to do that administratively?
I would prefer to do it administratively.
Okay, I didn't see that request in
No, you can go.
I know. Anybody else?
I think it's up to our council.
I would make a motion that we approve the preliminary plan for the 3-lot minor subdivision and, for AP Lot 4, Lot 121 EE, Diamond Hill Road, Anthony Poloni, and that we further guide the applicant to go to the planner for the final. And we do so by the planning board making the following findings of fact. Number one, each subdivision shall be consistent with the requirements of the Hopkinton Comprehensive Community Plan and/or shall satisfactorily address the issues where there may be inconsistencies. Two, each lot in the subdivision shall conform to standards and the provisions of the Hopkinton zoning ordinance. Three, there will be no significant negative environmental impacts to the proposed development as shown in the final plans with all required conditions of approval. 4, the subdivision as proposed will not result in the creation of individual lots with such physical constraints to development that building on those lots according to the pertinent regulations and building standards would be impractical. Number 5, all proposed land developments and all subdivision lots shall have adequate and permanent legal access to a public street. Number 6, each subdivision shall provide a safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic for surface water runoff control, for suitability building sites, and for the preservation of natural, historical, or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. Number 7, the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, and other improvements in each subdivision shall minimize flooding and soil erosion. That's it.
So that's a motion, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything.
Oh, yeah.
The next item on our agenda is an old business, and that's developmental plan review. It's a plan submission of a photovoltaic solar energy system, 813 Main Street, 1814, lot 47. That's the Hopkins property. South County Solar LLC is our applicant. No, Mr. Russo, tonight.
No, Mr. Russo is double booked this evening.
Oh, well, you tell him that the chair asked whether or not he was coming, because I had questions first.
Okay, well, hopefully I can address any of those that you may have. For the record, my name is Audie Osgood. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Rhode Island. I work for Street Engineering, located at 2 Stafford Court, Cranston, Rhode Island. Here tonight on behalf of the applicant and pinch-hitting for Mr. Russo. So I'm fairly familiar with the project and I've reviewed it. The lead engineer on the project is also with us tonight if there are any more technical questions that we need to get into. But my understanding is that the boards saw a presentation on this project back in July, and there were 3 comments or suggestions that concerns raised that required some addressing those outside of the meeting. And if it's acceptable to the board, rather than try to represent anything, just jump into those, addressing those concerns. And if there are any that we missed, we can cover those.
That's fine, thank you, sir.
So the first item, no particular order, but one was have the state permits in place. We received the DEM a few weeks ago and DOT today. We forwarded a copy of the DOT approval, but we also have copies here that for the board. Here. Thanks. So that piece of it should be all set. There are no other state permits that are necessary. You asked that the developer look at the screening along the private drive here, kind of especially as it relates to the homes on Cardinal Lane. So some additional landscape work was done, rendering that. I believe that was submitted to the board as well. So
right now, there's, what do you see there? If I went down Concha Lane there?
There's existing vegetation along the property line here. Some of that will be thinned, the taller trees will be thinned to help with shading, and then will be infilled with lower vegetation.
That's these little bushes here.
Screen, yes, and I think, so take a look here. So there's also a cross section, I think, of that view from the Canasha Cliffs driveway looking into the site. So there's some existing vegetation right adjacent, existing stone wall, and then there will be some new lower shrubs, and then some evergreens in the 7 to 10 foot neighborhood planted as screening inside of that, within that landscape buffer. And then selective clearing in the area inside of that.
So you're familiar with the sizing, so what size are these trees now on this picture?
On the picture, I didn't prepare that, so I don't know that I could say for certain. They certainly look like they might be a little bit more than
7 to 10.
7 to 10 feet.
Yeah, they do. They look more like maybe, I don't know, like 12 to 15-ish.
Just guessing
So like
based
half
on
the size, yeah.
the pole there, yeah, I think that would be
So would you be
reasonable.
able to see the solar panels from the road at planting?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that.
Okay, sure.
The cross section shows day one. The plan is to plant, we've enhanced the landscape plan for the trees to be planted at 50 foot at a minimum. So there'll be 8 to 10 is the range that we'll be able to procure them. So they'll be planted 8 to 10 feet. And, based on this sight line, that should sufficiently screen the view of those panels from the street.
So day one, we're not going to see them?
Day one, that's the...
I appreciate that, sir, thank you. And so at day one, so you're going to continue, sir, you're going to talk about one on the main road as well?
We have a rendering view of that as well. Yes, I don't know if that was provided in the...
It was the same as the one that was provided the previous time, so...
I don't think anything was changed on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
the big difference was, I think, when we proposed it initially, it was the trees were going to be planted at 4 feet.
Okay.
And now
We up?
upped it to 8 to 10.
Okay, okay. And so if my tree doesn't, I'm colloquially speaking, the town of Hopkinton's tree that's screening the solar panels doesn't survive, who do we call?
Well, these are warranted. I mean, they should take hold. If they don't take hold, they'll be replaced.
Okay. And so we call you, or do we call, I mean, we as, I take this seriously because, I mean, if there's a lot of deer and stuff, and so what happens if the screen isn't effective after like day one?
You'll call us basically
Okay.
to fix it.
Okay.
The hope is that the plants will remain.
It's always the hope.
They're all deer resistant.
Yeah.
Species, and there's a good amount of them, I think, for the, especially relative to the size of the project. It's a fair concern that we took into consideration. So.
Okay.
And if that covers the landscape piece, I can...
At least for me. Tom? Okay, you, yes.
And the third item that I had understanding from the July meeting was to undergo a third-party engineering review.
About the drainage, right?
Yes, drainage and stormwater management, which has been done. There were a couple of rounds of comments back and forth with the review engineer, and we received a letter this morning acknowledging that all of them have been addressed.
From CrossFit?
Yes. And I can go through those if you'd like to.
Could you briefly
version of them.
state what Crossman's, just so that we have it clear in our discussion here this evening. So Crossman's main concern were about the swales, and they were moved, and a little bit like details about that.
Yeah. Without getting too technical, the topography grading was revised a little bit more to make sure that these stone infiltration trenches were leveled up so that we had less of a concern with water coming in on one end and moving across without infiltrating and overtopping. There are some small berms around the lowest corner of them now to make sure that the runoff stays in those. There were also some changes in the grading at the driveway out here to make sure that additional detail was provided to ensure that the level spreader along here functions correctly. I know an analysis was done of sort of the entire upslope watershed to justify the sizing of the culvert pipe. I think those were the most significant concerns. There were some questions about what was pervious and impervious on the site. I know that Dave, some of those were addressed directly, some of them we went back to Crossman and said, really, is this exactly how we should be interpreting this? And they were flexible in acknowledging that with some additional engineering justification that we were appropriate in the assumptions that we've made. So.
Again, along the question on landscaping, we understand you do the best you can when you're designing this. And aside from a 100-year storm, let's not even talk about that. Suppose something like the landscaping gets eaten by deer. Suppose this doesn't work properly. You know, in a normal storm, a 25-year storm.
Right.
What happens, what recourse do who fixes it and who tells you to fix it?
That's a great question. I would, not being aware, my take on it from an engineering perspective would be that whoever caused the flooding issue would be ultimately responsible for that. So I would think that it would be the town would go back to either the developer of the project or the landowner and start with them to say, you know, this is runoff from your property into the public right-of-way. You know, you need to correct it. If they fail to correct it, the town, I think, would have recourse to correct it and back charge, put a lien against the...
I love preventing problems. And we've had a couple in town where the development right next door actually was designed per DEM standards, per every standard known to man, and it failed and failed and failed and failed. And it was a nightmare for the people that lived there, it was a nightmare for the town. Now this in particular project, you know, it's pretty slopey there, we all know that, and I love what you've designed. I think the world of you guys, quite frankly, and I think the world of Crossman. So I have no reason to believe it won't work. But what happens if it doesn't? That's my question, you know, and so it falls upon the bonding and the town and to go after who and what and when and where.
Right? As, yeah, with any other property in town, but yes.
Kevin, is that correct?
Yes.
Wait, we might not be done. I'm done.
You done? Rod?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I agree with Tom. You guys have a good track record. Everybody likes what you do. The plans really look good. It's already zoned for manufacturing. In my opinion, you're good to go.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I did want to, thanks for the reminder, just for the record, I don't know if it was covered previously or not, but the manufacturing zone, this is a use by right. So we're consistent with the zoning and we're consistent with a comprehensive plan. No new lots are created. Access to the site is not an issue. So from the findings standpoint, I believe we've addressed all of them.
And we do appreciate the additional looking at it through Crossman Engineering and looking at the drainage. But this parcel is, I mean, as you know, it is slopey and it's on this main road and it's a really important junction into our town. And so we just really wanted to do our due diligence. So, but we appreciate that, obviously.
Absolutely, yes. And this is a perfect example of, you know, someone else taking a look at things from a different perspective and you can fine tune the design and end up with something a little bit better for everybody, so.
The only other question that we haven't settled, Jim, is the decommissioning costs. Did we discuss that the last time? We didn't.
What projects of this size in the past, I believe they've done a High Street one
That was like about 10.
It's about 9,970, I believe.
Yeah, that was for Megawat. I think because last meeting we had two of basically this size project. One was on a little further down the road.
Right.
I don't have it in front of me.
I have,
If you have that, I think we proposed the same for both projects.
yeah,
Is that right?
60 something hundred.
6,598.
Okay, oh, I see that on, oh, you're right. Now, we would need to include that with whatever we were going to do this evening?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And we had no backup from Crossman on the decommissioning cost?
I don't
Just the
think we have.
engineering?
I didn't really ask him to look into that.
No, I didn't think we did.
I just wanted to check. Yes, Barbara?
I have a question. It has to do with the bond and the repair. If this swales and the things don't work, because I think we had a bond on Hopkinton Hill Road, we were able to access to repair so that it wasn't our town taxes repairing. But the other issue is this is Route 3, it's a state road, not a town road. So I don't know, maybe Kevin knows, who is actually going to be responsible for fixing it when it is not actually our road? It's state.
Well, fixing the problem or fixing the road?
Well, probably a combination, because it will, the rocks and mud and
the
will
town,
go onto the road.
Right.
Obviously, we can help clear it, and I'm sure they can, but if there's any damage done to the road itself,
it's just,
who fixes it?
well,
And who pays for it when it needs to be fixed? Because this is not just a town road like Hopkinton Hill, it's town.
yeah, the town has the police powers, the town has primary responsibility to protect the health and safety of its residents and to keep its highways and byways clear. So the town can exercise those police powers and require the property owner to reimburse whomever incurs costs to address the safety issue. Now, that would include repairs of the road. The repairs of the road is owned by the state. The state would have to approve the method of repairing it, which I think even goes down to the type of material that's used. And again, ultimately, the property owner that caused the problem would end up paying. It may be fronting the money by the state in that case, or the town, again, primarily to make sure it's safe, nobody gets hurt. But the town is entitled to get that money back one way or another. If there's a bond in place, fine, but those bonds typically don't go into perpetuity. But the town has its police powers through which it can get its money back. So, you know, it kind of depends on the particular facts as they develop, but ultimately the property owner will have to pay, and the town can lien the property, do whatever it has to do to get its money back.
Because you're leasing this chunk of land, there'll be a property owner still, right? For the rest of that property.
Yeah, it's big.
It's a larger piece than you're using. Okay.
We also do have to put up a bond with Rydot. It's not,
Oh, yes, that was in your letter, wasn't it?
it's not that much, but it's.
It was for 11,000. The proposed work would then impact the state right of way.
So he has a bond with Rydot.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's helpful. I just don't want the town.
I don't know how much it costs to fix a road though. So
A lot.
I assume that's more than 11, but.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, if we do something that causes much damage to a road.
Yeah. That's a
I'll
problem.
be in trouble as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but they don't complain to you, they can be complaining to us, or.
Yeah,
I do have one little thought. I'm not even sure if this is the proper place to view my opinion on this. Jim could probably answer this for me. It's the decommissioning cost. Your company has always gone along with whatever Hopkinton said, but as I stated before, being in the business for 45 years, I find it to be extremely low. There again, you're holding to all the rules that are in place. You know, God bless you for that. But I'm thinking they're giving away the farm on the decommissioning cost. A little case in point. Laborers now, their rate is $37.05 an hour. It's going to take 2 men working elbow to elbow, nose to the grindstone for an hour to get 6 of those posts, stanchions out of the ground and laid down in a safe manner. So we're looking at, with benefits and all, over $100 an hour just for that, for 6 posts. And if you multiply that by several hundred posts, it comes up to quite a lot of money. People say, well, it'll be a salvage thing. What's the salvage going to be worth in 20 years? What's a gallon of diesel fuel going to be worth in 20 years? What's the labor rate going to be in 20 years? 20 years ago, diesel fuel was $1, 99 cents to $1.05. Today, it's hovering around $3.50 to $4, depending on which gas station you go to. You know, there again, this is just my thought. You know, you guys have been 100% up and up.
That's the biggest crystal ball from our perspective
Exactly.
on these types of projects for wherever they are.
Exactly.
You know, what's the cost of scrap value for aluminum going to be, 30 years from now? What equipment are they going to be able to pull those posts with 30 years from now?
Might be another whole cottage industry.
I mean, even
Might
this
be profitable.
For someone, it will be.
Yeah. It'll be a nice one.
Yeah, there will. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there will be businesses that will specialize in decommissioning solar.
In Hopkinton.
If I'm around in 20 years, I think I might buy a machine.
Yeah?
Thanks for listening to my rant.
No, it's a valid concern. I think it's perfectly appropriate for the board to be thinking seriously about that.
Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Monroe. I had given Amy quite a few weeks back a study from New York State on decommissioning bonds because, like Ron, I had a lot of questions about it. And when I looked at that study, of course it's one study I looked at, in fairness, for a 2 megawatt system in 20 years, the estimate was, based on 2.5% inflation, would be $98,000 to remove that system. And what they did was they took everything below ground out, they took the solar panels, put the solar panels into storage, because at this point, maybe in 20 years we will, there isn't any facility that will accept those solar panels. So I think Ron's absolutely correct, and that these bonds, in my opinion, again, I think are really understated. It's a lot of money, it really is. I will look at some other sites, but that's the only one I looked at.
I will say that the solar panels themselves would continue to operate, so the panels themselves have value as generators of electricity even in 20 years, because they generally degrade about 0.5% annually, so they'll still be at 85% of their capacity at that point. So there will definitely be a salvage value in those panels. And then the raw materials, or the aluminum and stuff, that I agree, commodities, what if people will even use those materials in 20 years, maybe they're super valuable, I don't know.
Maybe there's a shortage.
Maybe it's a shortage.
Who decides when this will be decommissioned?
So that's a good question. Our lease, I believe, is for 20 years, and I think there's an option to extend it for another 5 to 10.
So if the panels were still operating efficiently and the project was still profitable, then it could, the lease could be renegotiated for another period of time. Doesn't mean that that facility will stop operating in 20 years.
Correct. Yeah, but that's correct. The contract for the power is only for 20 years.
Gotcha.
For what it's worth.
Gotcha.
So members of the board need to decide.
What are we looking for, Jim? Granting of development plan review?
Yes.
Does the final need to be done? Or is this it?
This is it. Just want to mention, we did get an email this morning, it was kind of directed to me, but asking me to note the emailer's objection to the project, written by Mr. Rick Olber, who lives on,
just make a comment on these letters? Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Again, gonna show my age. If you got something to say, get your butt here and say it. I really, really, really don't want to be reading people's letters out in public. You know, come here, stand up, tell us who you are, raise your hand, look us in the face, and say it.
Here, here.
You know, with all due respect to who wrote these letters, they may be wonderful, happy people, but come here and we come every night.
Point
and do it.
taken, Tom. But, you know, I also think that maybe it's a generational thing, Tom. So I think it's,
I said I didn't want to show my age again.
So basically, the issue, this, Mr. Ogden is opposing the solar panel going in. Part of the issue is that it's allowed by right because it's zoned commercial. This isn't going for a zone change. It's an allowed use. So that's what I would respond to Mr. Ogden if he was present. So
Did we decide on the decommissioning costs?
we did $6,598.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Is that,
And that's the whole project.
How many stanchions will be involved in this? How many aluminum I-beams are you gonna drive into the ground at 6 feet? That's my concern. The amount of time it's gonna take to take them out, the amount of time it's gonna take to put them in a safe manner so they can be disposed of, recycled, or whatever. Well, it's just like
The
it's a limit.
6,001 it's a 1 acre?
1 acre,
So it's a small, it's a small area. So that's
It is-
why
it is quite small.
that is, you know, it seems like it's a really small amount because it's very similar to the farm liability ordinance, a small project.
The difficulty in asking for a higher amount.
I'm rescinding it, because we've already set precedent, we can't have people anymore.
Right, right. Yeah, Barbara?
I was going to just suggest that at the last meeting, someone suggested to me, and I thought it was an interesting comment, is that there are energy consultants now to help negotiate between towns and solar, but they may also be able to negotiate or discuss the decommissioning and what it costs for different size and different kinds of systems. And I don't know if that's something either the council and or the planning board could hire an energy consultant to say, give us parameters on decommissioning, because none of us know that.
You know, I will bring that up to our official chair since I'm pitch hitting this evening, but that's a wonderful idea, Barbara.
I know we're all flailing here.
Right. So because we have precedence, I think we should use the 6,598 because it is a small 1 acre parcel.
Established limit, you know, going forward, that's why I worded it the way I did.
Right.
Yep.
Yep,
That's
point taken, Ron. Yeah, no judging, I get it.
I will move we grant development plan review, and the planning board makes the following findings of fact. The proposed development is consistent with the town of Hopkinton's comprehensive plan and/or has satisfactorily addressed the issues where there may be inconsistencies. 2, the granting of approval will not result in conditions inimical to the public health, safety, and welfare. The granting of such approval will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of the property in the surrounding area or zoning district. 4, there will be no significant environmental impacts in the proposed development as shown on the final plan with all required conditions of approval. And 5, the proposed development has adequate and permanent access to a public street. I'll also move that we set the decommissioning cost at $6,598.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just as a point of reference, just for my own little bank of knowledge, so I can kind of figure out for future use. You know, you guys, you followed up the rules, like I said, you've already been granted, you know, the amount. How many posts are involved in this project?
I don't know off the top of my head. The racking hasn't been, design hasn't been finalized, or, I'm sorry, it has, but I don't have.
We don't have it in front of us.
Okay.
So we could get that information for you. It's not going to be several hundred. It's about 600 panels.
Oh, jeez. We didn't say what, I'm sorry. Mark Planner just pointed out that we didn't state whether or not it was going to be cash, surety, lien on the property.
That's what most of those small ones have been.
It's been cash.
They've wired the cash right to the finance department.
Right.
Madam Chair, you do that by a separate motion.
Okay, Kevin, maybe we have a separate motion?
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion that the decommissioning cost of $6,598 will be in cash in escrow. No second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Sorry about that.
We can follow up with that information.
Okay, thank you.
The next order is new business, and there is none. All right, solicitor's report.
If I could have about 90 seconds, just because we have a new member here, I want to explain something that Keith, that you might not know, and just as a refresher for the rest of the board and the public who might be watching. With this type of vote for land development approval or subdivision approval, there's a state law that requires that an approval must be by a majority vote of the number of seats on the board, not necessarily the number of members who are present at that particular meeting. So, in other words, big deal decisions by the planning board like this, if there are 5 members that need to have 3 votes in the affirmative. So it's tricky if there are only 3 members here and this type of thing comes up, and perhaps one member doesn't like it and wants to vote in the negative. A 2-to-1 vote to approve would mean the project fails because it didn't meet the majority of the constitution of the board. So that's something that a new member would not know, and I just thought I'd take this opportunity because it could have come up tonight, and I'm glad it didn't. The other thing I wanted to say is to this cost of what it would cost to decommission in 20, 25, 30 years. I do a lot of work in my practice which involves projecting the present day value of future loss and future expenses. And if we present a case like that in court, we have to present expert testimony in the form of an economist and also an actuary. And it's almost mind-boggling to hear how they do the calculations. And they come up with what they refer to as the present value of future, whatever the future expense is. And basically they reduce that by 21%. I don't know how they get there, it's like abracadabra stuff, but it's enormously complicated. And then when you add to that all the variables about the price of aluminum, the price of labor, the price of all the things you talked about, Ron, it's never going to be an exact science. There's too many variables, but it's not something you can just take present values either and just multiply it by present values, because that would not be competent evidence in the court. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I basically just told you everything I know about it.
One thing back to the vote, Kevin.
Yep.
So there are 3 members here. An applicant comes before us.
For a major decision like this.
So the vote is 2-to-1.
It fails.
So it fails. What is the applicant's what happens then?
Well, then there's...
Do they get an automatic approval because the board failed to act?
No, it's the same as if it was a negative vote.
Well...
Because they need to get 3 votes. It's just like any change in the current law. They have to have an affirmative vote of a majority of the planning board.
I understand legally where you're coming from. It just seems common sense. Since when does 2 not mean 1?
No, I know. It's just because of the statute that says it. It's Rhode Island General Laws 45-23-16.
So on a vote of 2-to-1, 1 person controls it.
Can, yeah. And that's why,
It just doesn't seem...
No, it doesn't, but there's a state law, and we have to abide by it, and if we deemed it approved on a 2-to-1 vote,
Then somebody.
it would get tipped over at any point in time, and then you have people spending millions of dollars in investment, and that doesn't work out.
I'm not disputing your
Yeah.
findings of law.
Yeah. It's
I'm just saying,
and that's
it
why,
doesn't seem right.
Tom, that's exactly why I wanted to take up a couple minutes tonight to explain this. It does defy common sense, you're right, but we have to live with this.
Gotcha.
That's it.
I think it's why we need a lot of people.
The importance of coming.
Kevin,
No, I have a question for Kevin.
is that also true when the second project where you said where
Three people.
sometimes they'll be granted approval if the board doesn't act within a certain number of days?
Well, if the board doesn't act, then by definition, there's no vote. So if it gets approved automatically, there was never a vote, so you don't even get to that counting, whether it's a majority or not. That's operational law.
Kevin,
Does
excuse me.
the applicant have any recourse? Back to the scenario, 3 people here, 2 missing, it's 2-to-1 vote. Can the applicant come back and say, I'd like to have another vote taken? Or is it?
Well, if I was representing that applicant in that situation, and I'm reading the tea leaves as the meeting goes along, you can kind of get a feel for the way things are going.
Yes.
I'd probably ask for a continuance. And my experience, I've been doing this a lot of years, my experience is most boards would grant a continuance because they understand that this is, maybe it's just because somebody got the flu and this really is not the way we should do business. And they'll be here next time, and they're usually pretty liberal in granting it under those circumstances. But, you know, people have to be kind of on their feet and ready to try to do that. Most boards are pretty reasonable and accommodating those kinds of things, as they get.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I just have, what was that statute, Kevin? Was it 45-23-62?
63.
63.
Subsection D as in David.
2 year I was born. I know you don't believe it.
63, I don't believe it.
64. Anyway.
Joe, when I was a very little boy, you were one of my heroes.
Yeah, I was probably 30 then.
I'm feeling younger
Jim?
by the day.
Jim? Correspondence and updates? Nothing. Public comment? Date of our next regular meeting is November 7th, 2018. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.